Friends, reptiles, LARPers. What makes a good fantasy costume? That's an entire video, part of which I may have already made. But crucially, it all comes down to one thing: layers. A not infrequent occurrence is that someone asks how they can make their LARP costume better. And the answer I give in 99.9% of scenarios is Surcoat. I have an especial fondness for surcoats. They are one of my most favourite clothing items. I think they make basically every single costume just a little bit better, and they can also be extremely easy to make. So originally this was going to be one very long video, and I have now decided that just to get something finished, I'm going to split it up into 3 smaller videos, possibly 4, but don't worry about that right now. Before you see, the historical surcoat is a real thing, and we can look at how you make one of those. And then there is the approach whereby you can make a surcoat basically by taking the sleeves off any coat pattern, or, because I am a gremlin, you can do my favorite thing in the world, which is take a piece of fabric, fold it in half, cut it in half diagonally, sew the pieces back together, add some armholes, and that's a surcoat. It takes 10 minutes to cut, maybe 10 minutes to sew the seams, a lifetime to hem. That's what I'm going to be showing you how to do in this video. In medieval terms, the word surcoat can refer to a variety of garments, crucially that are worn over a coat or gown. You can have a variety of sleeves or sleeveless surcoats, even these very daring sideless surcoats, but in general, anytime you see some kind of overlayer, particularly if it looks like a dress with different coloured sleeves in a medieval painting, that's a surcoat. If you see a knight wearing something over their armour, it's probably a surcoat. This gets a bit wibbly, and there's lots of different heraldic garments depending on the year, location and style, which I'm not going to get into now because it's complicated and involves a lot of extant sources in bad handwriting, because anyone who tells you that men's clothing isn't well recorded hasn't been paying attention. But we're not making all or even many of these today. As previously discussed on the channel, subcultures are living cultures, and when you say surcoat to a LARPer, they're probably imagining something like this. I have a specific way of making these which is definitely not based in historical evidence, but is at the very least historically plausible. Yes, modern fabric is too wide and made of all the wrong things, but the basic principle of low waist and simple cutting isn't a million miles away from genuine medieval tailoring. Anyway, I'm going to demonstrate on a piece of paper. This demonstration is not to scale. This is your fabric with the right side and the wrong side, and I've assumed that you have fabric 150 centimeters wide and 1 meter long with the self edges marked in blue. Other dimensions will work. Fold the fabric in half, self edge to self edge. Then take your chest measurement and divide it by 4. With 150 centimeter fabric, this should work up to around a 48-inch chest, although it will be quite straight. We'll look at bigger or swooshier surcoats later in the video. Take your divided by 4 measurement and measure in from the top corner and the bottom corner. So here I'm marking 10 inches top and bottom. It doesn't matter which corner as long as they are on opposite sides, diagonally across from each other, because then you're going to draw a line across the fabric between those 2 points. Measure the length of your self edge, or down the front if you're not using the self edge. If you've got a 1 meter cut, this should be easy, but other lengths of fabric are available and will work. That's your overall length. Then you're going to measure down your diagonal line from the narrow end and mark the length there. Do the same for the other side of the diagonal line. You can then curve the bottom of your surcoat. This gives you a more even hem and avoids having hanging points at either side. The next thing to establish is your armhole depth. This is a bit trial and error. You can measure down from your shoulder, you can use a shirt you already like, you can just make a note of how the last one went, but either way you'll measure down, mark the bottom of the armhole and sketch a curve in. You don't have to make these very big, you're aiming for a lowercase L shape. Then it's time to cut everything out. You can shape the neckline a little if you want, but I don't always bother. The piece that was cut on the fold is your back, and the 2 separates are your fronts, with the self edge forming the front edges of your surcoat. At this point, I sew partway along the shoulder from the armhole side and either trim or just fold back the neckline. Then you can sew up the side seams, and that gives you a completed surcoat. First, we're going to make one exactly like in the paper example. This is a reasonably stiff upholstery fabric with an embroidered pattern, and I've lined it in a lightweight crepe. I start by laying out the fabric and marking the diagonal line. On this one, I used a t-shirt to determine the armhole depth, which makes for an armhole that's on the smaller side. I'm also using a dressmaker's curve, but this is not a complicated curve, you can definitely freehand it. I took a shortcut on this one, cut out one side and used it as a template so the armhole and hem on the other half matched. This tends to give you slightly different shapes rather than more accurate ones, especially if your fabric is thick or stiff. But this is also the quickest project in the world, so I'm not going to judge you for taking shortcuts. On this one I also opted to shape the back neckline slightly. If you think you've got the hang of it already, feel free to skip ahead to see some variations in the finished items. If you want a more step-by-step tutorial on how to sew one of these together, keep watching. For this one, I'm using a bigger piece of black cotton for the lining. I think it's around 2 meters by 1 and a bit meters, don't quote me, I didn't measure it. And so the selve edges are not in the same place. But the basic principle is the same. The fold is towards the camera and the front edge is away. Just as before, we are marking the chest measurement divided by 4 and then drawing the line across. Then I'm measuring the front length and measuring down the diagonal line. The difference will be more pronounced on bigger pieces of fabric, so it's even more important to pay attention to this step. I'm giving this one generous armholes because I plan to wear it with undergarments with big sleeves. For the outer fabric, I'm going to be using this embroidered crinkle polyester because I have 10 meters of it and it needs to go. It's not wide enough to cut the pieces on the fold, so I'm going to cut them out one by one. It would be really difficult to use the same cutting layout on this fabric, so I'm using the lining pieces as a template. With all 4 outer pieces cut, I need to sew at the back seam, then sew the side and shoulder seams. With the lining, where the back is cut on the fold, I just need to sew the shoulders and side seams. I'm also going to go ahead and hem both the outer and the lining, as they will not be connected at the hem. When you have a sewn together outer and lining with seams pressed, tuck one inside the other, right sides together, matching the shoulder seams and the front edges. Then sew around the front opening and the neckline. Once that's sewn, you can flip it right side out and press, so you have a finished front edge and neck but open armholes. Now I'm going to show you how I sew the armholes to get a similar finish. From the bottom of the front, go in between the lining and outer and make your way up to the armhole. Then grab the outer and the lining, turning them inwards so they are right sides together. Holding onto those edges, turn the surcoat inside out. You've now got a seam you can sew. Only sew the front half of the armhole at this point. When that's turned out, you'll have a nice clean edge at the front and the back will still be open. Go back down to the hem and between the outer and the lining of the back side this time and do the same thing of grabbing the edges and turning them inwards so they are right sides together. Flip the surcoat inside out again and you can now sew the back half of the armhole. I generally find this side easier because there's more room in the back. Repeat both these steps for the other armhole. On this surcoat, I also left the side seams open part way because I wanted to see what it would be like with side slits. I used a similar method to sew these, grabbing the edges from the inside and sewing each half separately. I'm not entirely confident with this choice of fabrics, but the overall look is pretty good. A few elements could be executed better, but that's not really the point of this garment. Hopefully, this more in-depth walk through the construction will be useful. I wanted to try doing this without sewing up the side seams, and I do think it's quite successful, although I got entirely carried away with embellishments, and so this one is not in the video. However, I did try the opposite, sewing all the seams, and that also seems to be quite successful. Even though the fabric is much longer, it's laid out and cut in the same way. Admittedly, it's much harder to show the orientation of the self edges, etc., because this is a random piece of lining of something. Is it a kimono lining? Is it from something else? I do not know. But it was in my stash, and I wanted rid of it, and I thought it would be interesting. I left the extra volume at the neck to just fold back and finished all the edges with either a double fold hem or on the overlocker, which was only marginally hampered by the fact that one of my overlocker needles fell out mid-seam. I didn't know they could do that. And so here we are at the conclusion with some of the surcoats that I have made. There's at least 2 or 3 more hanging out somewhere in my kit, but I can't find them all right now. But also even the same garment can lift different outfits in different ways. Whatever your costume looks like, I feel like a surcoat can either make it more or shift up the impression to a grander, more impressive one. A surcoat makes you look like you know what you're doing. I don't know how else to explain it. And there you have it. One small announcement from me before we move on to the outro of the video, which you will skip. In an effort to make the channel a little bit more sustainable and divest myself from slightly dodgy sponsors as much as humanly possible, I have decided to introduce an ad break to the video. What this means is if you head over to my Ko-fi page, there is a new option, which is to claim for yourself up to 1 minute of ad time in my next video. What can you put in this up to 60 seconds of ad time? Well, currently I am happy to shout out you, your pets, as long as you send pictures, a charity of your choice, your small business, make any announcements for your small business that you want to make, direct people to your social media, or indeed if you want to do the full Welcome to Night Vale and get me to say something kinda weird, you know what, I'm up for it. I will be checking. There's nothing super weird going on though. There will be more information on Ko-fi, but everything has to meet YouTube advertising guidelines. You can only promote yourself or your stuff. I will be double checking that there's no weird hidden meanings and stuff that you do. I will not do proposals. And right now I cannot guarantee timelines because I have an infant. But if something is time sensitive, let me know, I'll see what I can do. You can send photos, you don't have to, unless you are shouting out a pet, in which case the photos are mandatory. There's no real reason for that, I just want to see your cats. If you can think of something and you're not sure if it's viable, send me a message on Ko-fi, we'll figure it out. But in general, if you think that you or your business would like to be promoted to a whole bunch of queer nerdy weirdos, hit me up. I'm setting them at £10 off the bat and I am capping it at 5 per video. Although I might get a little more flexible if a whole bunch of people just want me to say their name. And for everyone who's not interested in that, the good thing about it being a clearly delineated ad break is that I don't have to try and smuggle it in the way that sponsors want you to sort of seamlessly integrate their advertisement into your video so people can't skip it. Because I'm not about that life. Sometimes you do not want to see ads and I respect that. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to keep YouTube gods happy. Down in the description box you'll find a bunch of links to follow me on other places. You'll also find links to become a channel member or to support me on Ko-fi. Both allow you to support the channel. Ko-fi lets you choose how much you want to pay per month, and YouTube members get a couple of extra little perks, like badges and emoji. Apparently I'm not allowed to do this outro on my own. Oh, that will be it. No wonder you were grumbly. But however you choose to support the channel, I couldn't do what I do without your help. Dream big, and I'll see you next time.